He did indicate that it was his preference that slavery be abolished, but preference isn't law, and preference isn't something you make war over. So, it was only when the war was, I won't say half over, but well begun, that Lincoln realized that from a political standpoint, this war had to be about slavery. This war was about slavery in a very fundamental sense, despite what the South said. This was, if not for slavery, the South wouldn't have seceded. And furthermore, and this is probably more to the point, Lincoln realized that the North, the Union, the United States, as he put it, might win the war. But if slavery still existed, nothing really would have been won. Because as soon as the war ended, the United States would be back simply where it was when the war began. And the question of, could slavery exist in the States? Could Congress or the President regulate slavery? It would remain as open as ever. Now here, I'm going to, well, Abraham Lincoln had a conflicted relationship with the Supreme Court. And sometimes he acknowledged the authority of the Supreme Court, and sometimes he didn't. During the war, he flouted Supreme Court decisions when it suited his military purpose. He thought that the Dred Scott decision of 1857, which overturned the Missouri Compromise, which effectively said that Congress could not ban slavery from the territories, he thought that was an immoral decision. He also thought it was bad law, but it was the law of the land, or so it seemed. So Lincoln had to figure out what to do. And he realized, well, he was a lawyer. Lawyers are clever. They can come up with reasons, justifications for doing sort of whatever suits their purpose. And he recognized that under his authority as commander-in-chief, he might issue the Emancipation Proclamation. He could say that slaves should be freed as a war measure. And as long as the war was on, his authority as commander-in-chief, it might be legally challengeable, but he had the army. And when you got the army behind you, you can do pretty much whatever you want. Of course, the trick was how to do this without alienating those slave states that were still part of the Union. So do you know how the feat was managed? What was his finesse with the Emancipation Proclamation? This is the irony of it all. The Emancipation Proclamation declared slaves freed in those states that Lincoln didn't have control over, those states in rebellion. And it said that the slaves in the states that were not in rebellion were still slaves. So it didn't free a single slave. Remarkable. And this is where Lincoln was exceedingly insightful. Although it didn't free any slaves, it changed everything. Because it made clear explicitly that the war is about slavery. This is what it comes down to. It made clear that if the Union wins the war, slavery is done. Well, maybe, maybe not. Because Lincoln recognized that his authority as commander-in-chief would lapse at the end of the war. And somebody, some Southern planter, would sue to get his slaves back and take the case to the Supreme Court and might win. So do you know what Lincoln did? What do you do when the Constitution doesn't say what you want it to say? You amend the Constitution. You rewrite it and get it to say what you want. And so Lincoln immediately proposed a 13th Amendment to the Constitution, barring the institution of slavery. Now, it didn't pass until after the war. But it was on the books, and Lincoln understood that it was absolutely necessary. Well, I've gone on far too long. You've been very patient and a wonderful audience. Thank you all very much.